My older sister is extremely beautiful. All men in town have a crush on her. But she has a unique taste. She only likes men who weigh over 300 pounds. The day my brother-in-law proposed to my sister, 8 people carried him onto the scale. He weighed over 500 pounds. My mom beamed with joy. He can provide nutrition for my grandson for a whole year. That night, my sister and brother-in-law entered the bridal chamber. But soon, painful groans came from the new house. I couldn't help but peek through the crack in the door. I saw my sister open her mouth wide greedily and frantically mulling on my brother-in-law. At this moment, I realized my brother-in-law has become a human meatball for my sister to replenish her nutrition. As a needy toe, he will be nibbled and eaten by my sister while he is alive and fully conscious. My sister is the most beautiful woman in town. She has a waist as slender as an ant's, and her eyes are as big as black grapes. Every man in town has shown love to her. But my sister only likes my brother-in-law. My brother-in-law weighs 527 pounds. He's too heavy. When he proposed to my sister, he sat on a wide wooden board and was carried by 8 people. The moment she saw my brother-in-law, my sister couldn't help but get excited. She swallowed and whispered in my mother's ear, "Mom, I like him. He is the fairest and strongest man I have ever seen." My brother-in-law is also the fattest man I have ever seen. His eyes were thickly narrowed into a slit. There were 5 or 6 layers of wrinkles on his chin, and the flesh on his stomach almost drooped to the ground. He couldn't take care of himself. He couldn't even walk. He was heavier than the old soul that had been raised in my family for 5 or 6 years. "Mother-in-law, I'm here to propose to Danny." My brother-in-law spoke slowly, panting for breath after every word, but his voice was very loud, and all the neighbors around heard it. A smile appeared on the corner of my mother's mouth, and she patted me on the shoulder. "Dakshang, hurry up and bring the scale at home. Every man in town has proposed to my sister. My mother doesn't want a betrothal gift. She only has one standard. The suitor needs to walk on the scale in my house. If the weight is less than 300 pounds, my mother will directly let them go. Over 300 pounds is considered the bottom line, and my mother will just glance at it. Only those weighing over 400 pounds are considered by my mother for her son-in-law." I covered my nose and walked past my brother-in-law, who smelled of sweat, and went into the house to take out the heavy-duty scale we used to weigh pigs at home. "Mother, some will definitely satisfy you." With the help of 4 or 5 men, my brother-in-law struggled to get up and walk towards the scale. The moment he stepped on the scale, the numbers on the scale soared, and finally, with a snap, it went off the charts. "Mom, I like him. I want to marry him." My sister couldn't control herself any longer. She was like an octopus clinging to the factory-head skin of her brother-in-law. "Husband, let's get married and go to the bridal chamber tonight." I suddenly felt that my sister was very heartless. My sister actually has a fiancé. The fiancé weighs 468 pounds, but this is a bit watery. Before he proposed to my sister, he ate 20 pounds of dirt to gain weight. But he was already the heaviest man my sister had ever seen at the time. Therefore, my sister was full of love for him and said that she would get married that night. It's just that the fiancé's gut and intestines were blocked by the soil, and he was paralyzed on the bed and couldn't move, so he couldn't have sex. My sister just walked away and told him to get out. Now that there's another super fat man, my sister's love is overflowing again. Good, good, good. My mother was obviously very satisfied with the marriage and clapped her hands and said several good things. In a row tonight, we will kill pigs, cook, and make wine. My sister is getting married to my brother-in-law. I had to run to every household in town before sunset to inform them. Time was tight. I knocked on the doors of the folks, yelling my sister is getting married tonight. Everyone must come to the wedding banquet. When I passed by Aunt Penny's house, I wiped the sweat off my neck and straightened my face and was about to knock on the door to inform them. But the door suddenly opened and a thin and delicate person threw herself into my arms. Deishang, I like you. Will you marry me soon? This is Aunt Ann's daughter, Catherine. She and I grew up together, and we both had a crush on each other. However, Aunt Inani didn't like me. She said it straight. You are too thin to be worthy of my daughter. I felt very wronged. I also weigh more than 200 pounds. Why am I not worthy? My mother stomped her feet in anger when she heard Angel's evaluation of me, but she kept comforting me. Takshang, it's not your fault that you are thin. It's because I was in love and didn't choose a good father for you. If your father was fatter, you wouldn't be laughed at by the people in the town. Then my mother would grit her teeth and say to my sister, you must work hard for me. Your husband must be the fattest and heaviest man in the town so that your brother can drink some broth and gain some weight. I asked my mother in confusion, Mom, what does my sister finding a fat man have to do with my weight gain? My mother smiled but said nothing. Snike, so I don't care anymore. Didn't I too late? At this time, Catherine poked her head out and her red lips moved towards my face. When we have cooked rice, my mother will have nothing to do. Get away from me. An enemy suddenly appeared from nowhere. Catherine was so frightened that she immediately pushed me away, but she kept pleading and muttering, Dashing, come to my house before dark tomorrow night. Shut up. Don't say anything shameless to me. Anthony grabbed Catherine by the hair and pulled her back into the room, then gave me a hard look. I know about your sister's marriage. Get out of here now. Don't think about Skinny Toad eating my Catherine's swan meat. Bang! The door slammed shut. I lowered my head and looked at the 5 layers of fat on my stomach with inferiority complex. Why? Why only 200 pounds? Why can't I be fatter? I hate it. My mom said that my dad died when she was pregnant with me. Before I had no feelings for my father. But now I have a deep hatred for him. It's all his fault. If he had super male obesity genes, I definitely wouldn't be so thin. Ah. Suddenly there was a painful scream from the house not far behind. Did Aunt hit her? My heart skipped a beat and I rushed back. Through a crack in the door, I heard Anna's furious voice, use your brain. Dayo-chun is a notoriously skinny guy. His little meat is not enough for you to fit between your teeth. My body froze. Things Alan said that my meat wasn't enough for Catherine to fit between her teeth. I clenched my fists tightly, wanting to smash the door panel with one punch and yell at her. We are all from the same town. How can you let Catherine eat me? At this time, Catherine's sobbing voice came. It doesn't matter if the eggshell is thin. Isn't Dad still in the big jar? Dad is enough for us to eat for a long time. An unprecedented fear swept through me. Not only did Catherine agree to eat my meat, she even ate her father's meat. Are they all crazy? Dasyong, why are you standing there at any store? Grandma Lilina, not far away, came slowly, with a cane. In an instant, the door in front of me was opened. Antoine poked her head out and stared at me with a gloomy face. Why haven't you left yet? Did you hear anything just now? Joa. What, Annie? I interrupted her abruptly, knelt on the ground, grabbed her trousers. Crying and said, Auntie, I just went back and forth, and I found that I really love Campfire. I beg you to make it happen for me and her. Annie relaxed her vigilance as expected. She kicked me, get out of here. She were only 200 pounds. It is not enough. I took the opportunity to sit on the ground. Brother lie bother to only love one flower. Grandma, Wilma's grandson, Jack, walked towards me. He was thinner than me, the wheat chicken, that everyone in town looked down upon. I ignored him and still pretended to be in love but couldn't ask for it. Aunt Annie, what do you want to do to let Catherine marry me? That's it. Jack walked up to me, pretending to help me up, but lowered his voice and said in a low voice, Stop pretending. You should know that women in town rely on eating their husbands to conceive and raise their offspring. His voice was not loud, but every word weighed on me like a mountain, making it difficult for me to breathe. But I still couldn't believe it. I gasped and said, what did you say? So you haven't found out yet? Jack patted me on the shoulder and gave me a pitiful look. It's okay. It's also very happy to be in an uninformed and romantic room for one night. The sun began to set. The sunset glow scattered across the western sky, falling on the surrounding dense forest. I was like a parasitized but already dead animal dragging my numb body. After informing all the villagers in the town one by one, I walked in the direction of home. Hurl. At this time, hundreds of tables had been set up at the gate of my house, and the neighbors in the town were all sitting on benches, talking. Lena is the most beautiful woman in our town, and Jason is the fattest man in the next town. This top-notch couple is getting married. The boy born must be the strongest, and the girl born must be the most beautiful. That goes without saying. I have already made a reservation for my great-grandson. If Lena gives birth to a daughter, she must marry my great-grandson. There are also some men who still confess their love to my sister. Lena, if your husband is not enough for you, you must give me priority if you want to continue. What are you talking about? Through the crowd, my mother glanced at me. She raised her eyebrows. What nonsense are you talking about in front of the child? The skin on my face began to twitch uncontrollably. My sister has never even killed a chicken. How could such a great beauty with her 10 fingers, not touching the spring water, eat her brother-in-law? I do not believe. I really don't believe it. Be calm. Don't show your fear. Jack appeared behind me at some point, and he lowered his voice again. Come with me. I followed him to the back mountain of my house. Brother, you have stronger anti-stress ability than me. Jack handed me a cigarette. When I first discovered that the women in town ate their husbands, I was so scared that I was peeing. I lit the end of the cigarette with a lighter and took a few puffs. Do you think I would believe you? Do you have to show me evidence? Jack was dexterous and climbed up a big tree in a few strokes. He sat on the thick horizontal branch, looked at the setting sun, and said, Didn't you notice that, after the women in the town get married, the husbands never appear in everyone's sight? The women in town, their shoulders can't resist, their hands can't lift, but they always have a steady stream of meat to eat. Don't you think it's strange? Jack threw out several questions in a row. But before I could answer, he explained himself. They eat their husband's meat. Cough, cough. Thick smoke choked into my lungs. I coughed so hard that I could hardly breathe. How do you know? I saw with my own eyes my eldest sister ate my brother-in-law. Jack's face gradually turned pale and frightened that night because I was playful. I hid under their wedding bed, and I heard my sister chewing on my brother-in-law's voice. I also overheard a lot of horror stories about town. On the wedding night, after the groom and bride have their wedding in the bridal chamber, the bride will soon conceive and give birth. In order to supplement nutrition, the bride will nibble on the groom's meat to prepare nutrition for the fetus in the womb. So to be more precise, the men in the town are the providers of nourishment for the women. And we journeyed to the West Daughter country. The women there can get pregnant by drinking water. Similarly, we also have a kind of water here, and it is called fertility water. As long as a man drinks it, he will willingly nourish a woman with his body. I don't want to die, so I'm leaving here tonight. Jack stretched out his hand, pointed in the opposite direction to the setting sun, and said, I'm going to leave town and head for a bright future. Do you want to go with me? I opened my mouth with difficulty. My mother said that it is very dangerous outside the town, and I should never try to go out. She lied to you. Jack laughed. He jumped down from the horizontal branch. My mother lied to me too, in order to keep us and let the women in the town conceive and reproduce. Daoshang, Daoshang, where are you? My mother's shout came from a distance. It's time to start the banquet and eat meat. I haven't to. The younger brother come out to toast. I was about to respond, but Jack patted me on the shoulder with an extremely dignified expression. Decent, if I remember correctly, will be an adult after tonight. The men in our town, on the day they become adults, their mothers will give them fertility water to drink. From then, you will involuntarily only think about having sex with women. Think about it carefully, whether to choose to escape with me or stay here, be swallowed alive by a woman, and then be marinated in a large altar jar. Run or not run? I was in a mercy. Then, take care. Seeing my hesitation, Jack shrugged indifferently and walked away from the town. His back was lonely, getting farther and farther away from me. Bjergsham, what's wrong with you? Not far away, my mother came towards me, a little displeased. Why didn't you say a word when I called you just now? I was silent for a long time, then suddenly roared, Mom, where is my dad buried? I wanted in his grave. Huh? I hate him. I blame him. I'm so thin, and he doesn't like me. A look of dodge appeared on my mother's face. Don't blame your father. Your sister is getting married tonight, and you will gain weight soon. She didn't answer my question directly. That is to say, my father was not buried, but was really eaten. I began to retreat, wanting to escape with Jack. Good boy, don't be too inferior. My mother touched my hair. Mother hasn't forgotten today is your birthday, right? I have prepared a birthday present for you in advance. As if by magic, she took out a small jar from her pocket. I took it hesitantly and opened the jar. Inside the jar was a pool of water. The water was warm, the color was blood, and it was bubbling with tiny bubbles and a faint fragrance. Drink it. My mother looked at me expectantly. Shang, you are growing up too, and it's time for me to find you a good wife. I was shocked. This jar contains fertility water. As long as the man drinks the fertility water, he will not be able to control himself and make himself a woman's physical nourishment. Den's mother, have you found your son? At this time, the shouts of the neighbors came from the bottom of the mountain. The bride and groom here can't wait to enter the bridal chamber. Come and preside over the witness. I raised my head, pretending to be about to drink. Mom, go back quickly. I will come to you after drinking the water. The neighbors urged urgently, and my mother couldn't care less and hurried down the mountain. After her back disappeared, I slammed the jar on the ground and ran madly in the direction Jack left. After a few hundred meters, Jack's voice came from the thick branches. I'm waiting for you. I knew you would come. He was waiting for me. My heart, which was originally fearful, suddenly calmed down. I looked up, staring at Noah, and never wanted to leave. Jack smiled. You don't want to leave? Then why are you running so fast? I backed away step by step. I wanted to kindly remind you that you can't escape in this direction. The end of this road is a cliff. Well, I know. Jack jumped down from the treetop, smiling nonchalantly, because I never thought about running away. As I thought. I should have noticed earlier that you are an adult, and you have already drank the fertility water. What you are thinking about now should be marrying and having children, with a woman not escaping from the town. My hands secretly gathered strength. Tell me, what do you want to do by tricking me here? I want to eat you. Jack approached me step by step, his face grim, his tone approaching madness. I want to get married. I want to have sex with a woman. Even if I get eaten by a woman, I am willing. But I am too thin. The ugliest woman in town would not even look at me. Later, I heard a secret recipe that you can gain 100 pounds by eating the same kind. At this moment, his yellow eyes were full of bloodthirsty and greed. Your meat looks delicious. Delicious, your mother. I jumped up abruptly, and while he was not paying attention, I raised my fist high and slammed it hard on Jack's head. Jack was obviously prepared. He bent down and dodged, grabbed a wooden stick from the ground, and stabbed at me indiscriminately. He should have died a long time ago. Do you know I like Catherine more than you? But why? You're just 10 pounds heavier than me. Why does Catherine like you? Jack held his breath and his stick fell like raindrops crazily. I was knocked to the ground, unable to open my eyes, unable to breathe. I realized I am no match for Jack. He drank the fertility water and he had a crazy obsession with courtship in his heart. This obsession allows him to do whatever it takes. All I can do is beg for mercy. Dajong, let's talk about it if we have something to say. I covered my head with my arms and shouted in horror, don't you just want to gain weight? My brother-in-law has a lot of meat. I'll get some for you later. I just want to eat you. Jack obviously saw through my plan. He jumped up, and the thick stick fell straight towards my forehead. Go to hell. At this moment, I grabbed the dirt on the ground and threw it hard at his face. The rough and dusty sand got into Jack's eyes and his figure froze. Taking advantage of this gap, I hurriedly turned over, grabbed a stone next to me, and slammed it hard on the back of his head. Pong. The stone collided with the bone at the back of the head with a dull thud. Red blood gushed out from the broken skull. Jack fell to the ground and stopped moving immediately. Buratin. I was still wary, Jack. Ooh. He remained motionless, but I know he's playing dead. His palm was still clutching the wood, stick tightly, waiting for an opportunity to counterattack. But I won't give him any chance. I gathered my strength again, took the stone, and slammed it hard in the kneecap of his legs. With another sling from me, Jack stopped pretending and let out a painful groan. Are you trying to eat me? His kneecap had been shattered by me. He is no longer a threat to me. I threw away the blood-stained stone. I will never eat my own kind. Ha ha ha. Jack laughed. He laughed crazily before I drank the fertility water. I said the same thing, but let me tell you, the happiest thing in the world is to be eaten by the same kind of female and to eat the same kind of male. You're crazy. I won't argue with you. I took a deep breath and walked towards the bottom of the mountain without looking back. You can do it yourself here. The sunset completely fell. The bright moonlight softly filled the entire town. By the time I got home, the banquet was over, and the folks had all eaten and drank and gone back to their homes. My mother stood at the door, ding her feet and looking forward to me. Why did you come back? Really, I am going to find you. After welcoming me into the house, she asked anxiously again. Dake Shang, did you drink the watering nectar? I stopped abruptly and looked at her. What if I didn't drink it? He didn't drink. My mother's face turned ugly. She pressed my shoulders hard and asked me hysterically, Devour, you didn't drink that water. She was very strong and her fingernails almost dug into my arm. She was really angry. It was the rage that was about to come. I had a hunch that if I said I didn't drink, my mother would be so angry that she would kill me. So I hurriedly changed my words. I drank it. I drank it. My mother stared at me suspiciously. You didn't lie to me. She added, Daixian, let me tell you the watering. That jar is very precious and limited edition. If you haven't had it, you must tell me in time. I nodded. Mom, I drank it. I will never lie to you. Only then did my mother breathe a sigh of relief. She pointed in the direction of the kitchen and said, I have left food for you in the house. Go and eat quickly. There was a large basin full of rice on the dining table in the kitchen, and it was still piled high with pork. I stared at the food, feeling very depressed. My mother is actually very kind to me. The family conditions are not good, but she always tries her best to let me eat food, but seldom lets my sister eat. But why did she insist on letting me drink the fertility water and let others eat me? Late at night, there was a rustling sound. Is there a thief? I quickly opened my eyes, got out of bed, and went out. But I saw my mother hunched over, carefully opening the door of the living room and then carefully closing it. I frowned. Why did she sneak out behind my back late at night? Where is she going? Just when I was about to follow her secretly, I heard bursts of painful groans coming from my sister's room. The groan came from my brother-in-law. The voice was extremely shrill, as if someone had pierced the body with tens of thousands of 10-centimeter steel needles. Leishia. A painful scream reached my ears again through the door of the new house. Is my sister really going to eat my brother-in-law? In order to verify my guess, I plucked up the courage to peek through the crack of the door. Through a narrow gap, I saw my sister was lying on top of my brother-in-law, greedily and frantically gnawing on something. It's just that although my brother-in-law was in pain, his facial expression was smiling. This weird and terrifying scene made my blood stagnate, but my heart couldn't help beating wildly. It beat so hard, it felt like it would jump out of my chest. Jad didn't lie to me. The groom is really the bride's nourishment. I was like a puppet whose soul had been taken away. My body was so stiff that I couldn't move at all. It seemed like a long time had passed before There were soft footsteps at the door. I wanted to pretend that nothing happened and go back to my room, but I was in so much pain that I couldn't move for a while. Just listen to the creak. The door was pushed open. My mother came in. She smelled of blood, raised her hand, and was about to take off her clothes. But I saw me unexpectedly. She was very surprised. "Why are you standing at the door of your sister's wedding room?" "No." I couldn't control my emotions anymore and yelled angrily, "Sister is eating brother-in-law." My mother's eyes widened, and she rushed up abruptly. "You didn't drink the water in that jar. How do you lie to me?" "Yes, I didn't drink." The horrible scene just now completely broke down all my sanity. I shouted out of control, "Stop treating me like a child and deceiving me. I know everything. Once a man in town reaches adulthood, he will drink that red fertility water, so that he will be willing to become fish and meat to be eaten up by women." My mother raised her hand as if to hit me. In the end, she stopped abruptly and looked at me with a side action. "You are my own son. How could I harm you?" I shouted frantically. "Then tell me, is the red water the fertility water? Will I be eaten if I drink it?" My mother was silent for a long time. Finally, she responded in a low voice, "Yes." I laughed, but then I couldn't help but want to cry. She made me willingly to be eaten. Isn't that harming me? I gave her an angry look and turned to run outside. Behind me came her yell, "Dakshong, it's dark outside. Don't run around." I ignored her and ran like a wild beast. The wind blew towards my face and past my ears. I ran even more frantically until the last bit of oxygen in my lungs was exhausted. When I bent down and stopped, I realized that I had arrived at Catherine's house. Catherine, my favorite Catherine. I really, really like her. But she wants to eat me too. I couldn't help but want to ask her if I didn't let her eat, would she still like me? The windows in Catherine's room were not curtained. Borrowing the dim light of the moon, I tried hard to look inside, but found that something was wrong with her. She was lying on the bed, her body writhing constantly. Her mouth was wide open. Her body was undulating up and down like a wave. It was scary. Her soles could actually buckle 180 degrees, and her head was almost twisted to the back. "Catherine, Catherine." I tried calling her name, but she was deaf as if she couldn't hear me. At this moment, with a creak, the door of her room was pushed open, and when I walked in, she seemed to be used to Catherine's distorted posture. She just shook her head and took the quilt and covered Catherine. After covering the quilt, Alanie seemed to have discovered something and suddenly raised her head, staring straight at the window. My heart skipped a beat and I quickly crouched down. Aunt Hannah's cold and contemptuous voice came still popping. I said, "When Catherine can't marry, you get out." I didn't speak, but stood up straight and left in front of her. At this time, cicadas chirped in my ears. I looked up at the bright moon hanging high in the sky. It's better to be the moon. No worries, no fatigue, no hunger. I ended up not leaving Catherine's house. Her strange appearance worried me. I casually found a haystack and was about to take a nap before going to see Catherine. But fatigue finally overwhelmed me as my eyelids got heavier and I fell asleep. A sweet voice came from beside me, "Dakshong." I woke up with a start and opened my eyes, only to see Catherine beside me. Everyone in town says my sister is the most beautiful woman in town, but I think Catherine is the most beautiful. Her eyes are big, and protruding her figure is slender. Her limbs are slender, how beautiful she is. If she were my wife, I would cry to death of joy. At this moment, staring at her beautiful big eyes, I poured out my love, Catherine. If I don't let you eat, will you still like me? If she said she would still like me, I swear I will do whatever it takes to get her out of this horrible town. If she said no, I don't know what I would do. I admit that I'm a coward. I love her, but I also cherish my life very much. Yes, I love her, but I love myself more. Yes. Catherine threw herself into my arms, her white hands wrapped around my neck. Her red lips went straight to my mouth. Dakshang, I like you. Even if I starve to death, I won't eat you. I'm ecstatic. At this moment, I feel like I am the happiest in the world. I couldn't control myself either, and tremblingly brought my lips closer to hers. Just as we were hugging each other tightly, Aunt Annie appeared with a livid face. She was holding an iron shovel in her hand and slammed it on us without hesitation. Shameless things. Catherine exclaimed and subconsciously pushed me away. I shouted angrily. Are you crazy? You almost hit your daughter. Aunt Annie picked up the iron shovel on the ground and slammed it hard on my leg. You toad. I couldn't dodge in time. My leg was hit by her. The flesh and blood burst open. Immediately, the bones seemed to be broken. And there was a crisp sound. This time I'm going to break your leg. Aunt Annie grabbed Catherine tightly and stared at me fiercely. Next time, if I see you shamelessly following my daughter, I will kill you. Catherine was dragged away by Aunt Annie. I collapsed on the ground, clutching my broken leg in pain. Aunt Annie hit my blood vessel, and the blood from my leg kept flowing. Although I am only 200 pounds, which is relatively thin in the town, it is still difficult for me to bend down and bandage myself. Finally, I gritted my teeth and crawled towards home. My mother feeds me virtually water. I don't like her, but only she will bandage me. The door of the house was not locked. I pushed it lightly and it opened. I just crawled to the main hall. I heard painful screams from my sister's wedding room. However, it was my sister's cry this time. Obviously, my sister is eating my brother-in-law. Why is my sister in pain now? My mother was also in my sister's room, and she kept comforting her. Lena, you must hold on. It will be very painful at first, but later you will gradually get used to it. I am full of doubts. I couldn't help but crawl towards my sister's room, and outside the crack of the door, I only saw my sister's head buried in my brother-in-law's stomach. My sister is still eating my brother-in-law. It must be the first time my sister ate like this, and she was not used to it. That's why my mother said that she would get used to it later. At this time, my mother gently rubbed my sister's back. I came here like this, and now I feel very used to it. Suddenly, a powerful male voice came from the room. Of course you feel good. What about me? I hadn't seen the sun for a long time. My mother asked back, what's the use of seeing the sun? The man smiled. That's right. You see the sun, you still have to do farm work. It's better to just mess around like this every day. I frowned. There were clearly only 3 people in my sister's wedding room. My sister, brother-in-law, and mother. But why did a man's voice suddenly appear? I know very well that this male voice does not belong to my brother-in-law. My brother-in-law would pant 4 or 5 times after saying a word. But whose male voice is this? The curiosity in my heart was aroused again, and I couldn't help but stick my head out, wanting to see more clearly. My mother sat beside my sister. Her mouth made a deep male voice. Mina, the husband you found, is good. He weighs 5 or 6 of you. I guess you can give birth to 5 or 6 cubs. The next moment, my mother's face changed, and her mouth made a normal female voice again. Of course, my Lena is the most beautiful daughter I gave birth to, and I carefully cultivated her just to be able to a super heavy husband proposes to her. Immediately her tone became a deep male voice. Again, not bad, not bad. You have worked hard to take care of Daxing and Li Yan. Before she could finish speaking, her voice turned cold. Someone. My mother turned her head and looked out the door immediately. She saw me and her expression immediately became tense. Shang. What did you hear? Why do you make a man's voice? I endured the pain in my leg and rushed to her. Nust, how many secrets do you have that you haven't told me? Tell me. I felt a surge of anger welling up in my heart. It was a kind of powerlessness, a hatred for myself. I feel like I'm in a virtual jail. Everyone around me is hiding something from me. I can't find the truth. I'm like a child being coaxed and concealed. All I have is hysterical rage and yelling. Probably because I was too excited and felt a heart-piercing and lung-splitting pain from my heart and injured leg bone. It was as if a hard iron-like bug was drilling into my heart. I suddenly let out a scream of pain. Then my eyes went dark and I passed out. When I woke up again, I found myself lying in bed. The wound on my leg had been bandaged. The small table by the bed was filled with all kinds of food. Our town is poor, and we usually eat vegetarian food. Meat is usually only available during Chinese New Year and weddings. But now, the small table is full of meat. However, the meat was all red, and it looked like it hadn't been cooked. But I know very well. It is the fertility water that is poured on top. My mother really didn't give up. She tried to make me drink fertility water again and again. Does she really want me to be eaten willingly? The fertility water in front of me made me inexplicably irritable and wanted to vomit. But I covered my stomach, but couldn't vomit anything. I could only get out of bed. Angrily. Mom, I thank you very much for bandaging my wound, but now I swear I will never eat any of your food again. This time, I really made up my mind. I want to leave town. Unexpectedly, my mother didn't stop me. When I passed by Jack's house, I saw a portrait of Jack placed in the main hall of his house. Grandma Weena was burning paper money and crying loudly. Jack, my Jack, I told you, don't think about remedies and take shortcuts. Alas, you are dead. Our old Lena family really has no successor. Jack is dead. My face was full of disbelief, but I didn't kill him. Why in here? Grandma Lena raised her head. Her old face was full of tears. My Jack wanted to eat you, but you were counter-killed. I won't take revenge on you, but don't show off in front of me. It turned out that she knew everything Jack wanted to do to me. The only sibling of my old Lena family is dead. Why don't you get out? Grandma Lena poured the ashes from burning the paper money in the basin on me, trying to drive me away. Get out. As I was being swept away, I pretended to accidentally touch the lid of the coffin. Found that there was only a piece of Jack's clothes inside, without his body. My heart trembled and I ran madly towards the back mountain. On the back mountain, there were only fragments of Jack's clothes hanging on the broken branches and leaves, and a ground of blood and minced meat. Jack should have been dismembered. I thought of my mother sneaking out in the middle of the night and coming back covered in blood. Could it be that my mother killed Jack? I felt fear for my mother again. All I can do is run. I strengthened my belief in escaping from here. But I want to take Catherine with me. I came to Catherine's house again. This time I observed carefully for a long time, but Inkshani was not at home. I breathed a sigh of relief and sneaked into her house. Catherine. I called her name in her main hall. No one answered me. I took a deep breath and walked towards her room, only to find her taking a bath. Her small body was completely immersed in the large wooden barrel. However, she didn't look comfortable. Her face was very ferocious, and the corners of her mouth were distorted. Catherine. I was worried that something was wrong with her, and wanted to see what was going on. Suddenly my mother appeared, her voice extremely frightened. Daoshang, don't go near her. Don't go near her. I'm completely outraged. My mom didn't stop me from leaving town, but she's following me. Daoshang, don't go near her. My mother quickly came towards me. She grabbed my arm. It's not Catherine in the bucket. What are you talking about? Are you afraid of me being treated like a child and being deceived again? I no longer trust my mother. I tell you, I like Catherine. I want to take her away from this terrible town with me. My mother said, Daoshang, how could I harm you? While speaking, she took out a jar again. Unlike the fragrance last time. This time, the jar had the fishy smell of minced meat. Obviously, she put the fertility water on the dishes on the small table into it. Thump thump. Catherine, not far away, seemed agitated when she saw the fertility water. Her face was contorted in pain as she writhed in the water, but her mouth didn't utter a word. My mother opened the jar and walked towards Catherine. I subconsciously stopped. You want to give Catherine the fertility water. You haven't hurt me enough. Do you want to hurt Catherine too? My mother ignored me, ran quickly, and poured all the fertility water into Catherine's wide open mouth. Helima. Catherine let out a scream of pain. Her body twisted even more violently, like a water snake, rolling back and forth in the bucket. What are you doing? I whirred angrily and tried to pick up Catherine on one leg. I whirred angrily and tried to pick up Catherine on one leg. Clap! The next moment, Catherine's skin shattered. My eyes widened in horror and daze. Catherine was poured fertility water and exploded. My mother has such a cruel heart. She wanted me to be eaten willingly. I don't do what she says. She gave the fertility water to my favorite Catherine. Then Catherine died. I roared angrily at my mother. Take a closer look. My mother pointed at the wooden barrel in water and said, take a closer look. What is in the barrel? I glanced at the bucket, but I saw that there were no bones or flesh of Catherine in the bucket, only her thin layer of skin, and it was packed with dense, transparent, long strip-shaped worms. I was so scared that I couldn't speak. My mother patted me on the shoulder and repeated, Daoshang, I am your mother. I will never harm you. My Catherine. Gray. Aunt Amy screamed and ran in. Her eyes widened, she knelt on the ground, crying and shouting at my mother. Why did you kill my daughter? Why did you kill my daughter? My mother's expression was indifferent. Drowning a child is like killing a child. You can't blame me for your daughter's death. Tears streamed from Antony's eyes, but she stared at me sinisterly. Your son will die too. My mother took my arm and walked out. As she left, she said, my love for my son is deeper than your love for your daughter. Understand their conversation. Catherine's death saddened me more than ever, but I also vaguely felt that her death had nothing to do with my mother. Like a stubborn child, I kept questioning my mother. Why did Catherine become like this? Where did her flesh and blood go? My mother said nothing. Her silence made me even more irritable, and I felt the piercing pain in my heart became more serious. Bang! I fell to the ground. Then I heard my mother's voice and a man's voice again. Oh, forget it. Let him know the truth. He is my only descendant. He has the right to know the truth. My mother shook her head and said in a female voice, No, absolutely not. The male voice smiled. You should have discovered that Dick Shang has been infected. Infection? What does infection mean? My mother also sighed with her original voice. It's my fault that I didn't take good care of him. Immediately, she looked at me and said in the male voice, Son, I know you have a lot of doubts in your heart. Now I will answer them one by one. I'm your father whom you've never met. I'm not dead. I'm just parasitic in your mother's body. Our town is poor, and food is scarce. However, it is the nature of our race to reproduce, but the existence of offspring makes food even more scarce. As his voice spoke, I saw my mother's appearance began to change. She began to change towards the appearance of a man. Her hair began to shorten, her neck thickened, her eyebrows thickened, and her body began to get fatter and fatter. The voice she made became rougher. Therefore, on the wedding night, the bride will eat the groom. But the groom's body no longer exists. His soul will live forever in the bride's body. In a way, your mother and I are hermaphrodites. It's just that most of the time I'm in a deep sleep. Occasionally, in the early hours of the morning, I will wake up and use your mother's body to go out to work. I suddenly thought of the scene where my mother sneaked out last night and came back covered in blood. So I couldn't help asking, what did you move out to work last night? Did you eat Jack's body? We only eat our own husband's body. My dad smiled and said, My soul can live in your mother's body because I signed a contract with the mountain god. After signing the contract, I cannot see the sun and can only wake up late at night. Every time I wake up, I need to hunt the egg mother to offer sacrifices to the mountain god. And the egg mother is the most terrifying evil creature in our town. She will reproduce a large number of eggs, which are the transparent bugs in Catherine's body. That night I was covered in blood because I hunted and killed an egg mother. His explanation gave me the feeling of opening the door to a new world. But one question after another came to my mind. Then why is Jack's body missing on the back mountain? Also, why are there transparent bugs in Catherine? My dad explained patiently, Jack's body was eaten by the egg mother. After the egg mother eats the people in our town, she will reproduce a large number of eggs. As for the transparent bugs in Catherine's body, cough, cough, cough. This time, my mother has completely become what my father looked like. My dad really doesn't look fat about my weight. He coughed a few more times and looked at me with a smile. The people in our town before the age of 18 can be protected by the mountain god and will not be harmed by the egg mother. But after the age of 18, it's not necessarily so. Therefore, in our town, no matter men or women, as long as they are adults, they must drink the fertility water that night. A man who drinks the fertility water will not only be immune to the egg mother, but will also forget the pain and be willing to be eaten by the bride. At the same time, the fertility water will also protect the groom's soul so that he can successfully parasitize in the bride's body. Women who drink fertility water will also be immune to the egg mother, and they will be able to successfully give birth and reproduce. I asked, so Catherine didn't drink the fertility water, so her body is full of transparent bugs. My dad moaned. Cold sweat involuntarily broke out on my forehead. Then, now I have been an adult for 2 days. I hadn't drunk the fertility water. Have I been parasitized by the egg mother's transparent bugs? Not bad. My dad's voice gradually became less deep and even a little weak. Did you kiss Catherine? Did you feel a warm bone in your heart when you were angry? Every word he said was right. It made me even more flustered. I covered my heart and said, there are transparent bugs in my body. Yes. My dad patted me on the shoulder lightly and conjured up a can of water like magic. But don't worry, as long as you drink fertility water, you will be fine. This time, without any hesitation or suspicion, I raised my head and drank it down. It was also at this time that I felt that I was very stupid. My mother never really hurt me. If at the beginning I didn't take the conversation between Jack and Catherine to heart, I trusted my mother infinitely and drank the fertility water directly, maybe my mother and I wouldn't have so many conflicts. Thinking of this, I couldn't help but hug my dad tightly. Dad, I'm sorry. It's my fault. It's okay. My dad touched my head. It was my fault for not telling you about these things, which led you astray. I couldn't help but ask, Dad, why didn't you tell me about the mountain god, the egg mother? If you could have told me earlier, I wouldn't have gone astray. Cough, cough. My dad coughed again. He covered his mouth with his hands and said, my child, remember what I said just now are all taboos of the mountain god. The mountain god does not allow anyone to talk about him. And you, absolutely not allowed to say anything about this to anyone. No wonder my dad, or my mom, never bothered to explain to me when I questioned and got angry. It turned out that this was a taboo against mountain gods. My heart suddenly skipped a beat. No, my dad told me. Did he offend a mountain god? Cough, 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 cough. I've angered the mountain god, and my soul will be taken away by the mountain god. My dad coughed again, and a great reluctance appeared on his face. After living in your mother's body, this is the first time I have shown up. It feels so good. I haven't seen the sun for a long time. Dio-sheng, do you know I feel very happy at this moment by my side. Cough, cough, there's warm. Sunshine, cough, cough, and seeing you. My dad spoke slower and slower. He coughed up blood with every word he said. Then his body became thinner and smaller. Gradually, it became transparent and then disappeared completely. My dad's soul is gone. At this time, my mother's body fell to the ground as if she had been drained. I hurriedly shook her, but she didn't respond. She is also breathless. Gory. I knelt on the ground and cried. But in such an emotionally excited situation, my heart didn't feel any piercing pain anymore. I looked up and asked hoarsely. My dad broke the mountain god's taboo. But why did my mother die too? No one answered me in the empty mountains. It wasn't until later, when I got married and lived in my wife's body, that I found out. Fertility water is extremely precious. It was formed from a drop of blood from my mother's heart. Without the blood from her heart, my mother would naturally die. On the day our town's children turn 18, the mountain god will take the initiative to give a cane of fertility water. But that can of water was smashed by my stupidity. My mother divided the blood from her heart into 2 parts. One was poured into Catherine's mouth, causing the transparent worms in Catherine's body to appear. The other part she gave me to drink. I was already crying. My mother told me again and again that I'm her child and she would not harm me. If I can believe her a little bit, she wouldn't have died. After drinking the fertility water coupled with my sister's, helped my weight gradually increased and finally reached the bottom of 300 pounds. I married a wife. On the wedding night, my wife was lying on my stomach, but I didn't feel any pain at all. My soul successfully parasitized into my wife's body. Later, late at night, my wife chatted with me. She said she envied my sister. My sister gave birth to a child, gave birth to 6. She also said that I am too light, and I guess she can only have 2 or 3 children. In our town, the number of children is directly proportional to the weight of the groom on the wedding day. As my wife guessed, she only had 2 children, a boy and a girl. When my son became an adult, my wife gave him a jar containing the crimson fertility water bestowed by the mountain god. The son looked exactly like me. He directly smashed the jar, his face full of disgust and anger. Mom, do you think I am a child? I knew very well that if I drink this water, I will become brainless, will be eaten by my wife. My wife sighed again and again. This child must have heard some rumors. What should I do? If he doesn't drink fertility water, he will be infected by the eggs of the egg mother. I smiled relievedly. I've lived in your body for a long time. I want to see the sun tomorrow. On a sunny day, I occupied my wife's body, spoke in a deep voice, and talked with my rebellious son. Son, I know you have a lot of doubts in your heart. No, I will answer them one by one. I'm your father, who you've never met. I'm not dead. I'm just parasitic in your mother's body. I said a lot. Later, my voice became weaker and weaker until my son hugged me and cried in repentance. I caressed his head. Son, at this moment, I feel the sunshine. I feel you. I am really happy. Really, very happy. Under the clear sky, a gentle breeze blows. My body began to become transparent until it disappeared. I am dead, but my children will continue to stay in town, shouldering the task of reproduction.